3 months later, Jinho stood on the surface of a Vreth colony world called Sanctuary and watched the sunset over crystal forests that sang. In the evening wind, he had intended to leave after his wounds healed. He had jobs waiting, contracts that needed to be fulfilled, a life that existed before he ever set foot on Threshold 7 and met a terrified child in a burning corridor. But every time he mentioned leaving, something happened. His ship needed repairs that the Vreth mechanics were happy to perform for free. His trade license was mysteriously expanded to include collective space with full diplomatic protection. His quarters in the colony's visitor wing were upgraded to a permanent residence, complete with a second room that Tyrus had already claimed as her own. Kellinus was not subtle about what she was doing. She met him in the central garden that evening, her wings catching the last light of the fading sun, and she stood beside him in comfortable silence while the crystal trees chimed their twilight song. "I know what you have been doing," Jinho said finally. "Do you? You have been making it impossible for me to leave." "Not impossible," Kellinus said, "merely inconvenient. You could still go if you truly wanted to. I have not taken your ship or locked you in chains. You have done everything except that." "Yes." Jinho turned to face her, and he found that he was not as angry as he should have been. "Why?" he asked. "Because I watched you bleed for my daughter," Kellinus said. "Because I watched you stand when your body begged you to fall. Because I have seen how you are with Tyrus, how patient and gentle, how you make her laugh and help her with her studies and let her climb all over you like you are a piece of furniture. She is a good kid. She is. And she adores you, and I will not let someone she adores disappear into the galaxy where we cannot find them." Jinho shook his head. "You cannot just keep someone because you want to," he said. "That is not how relationships work." "Is it not?" Kellinus said. "I have been studying human customs since we met. I have learned about your courtship rituals and your family structures, and your peculiar habit of falling in love with beings you should have no logical reason to care about. And from what I can tell, keeping someone because you want to is exactly how your species operates." "That is different." "How?" Jinho opened his mouth to answer and found that he did not have one, because she was right. In a way, humans did form attachments that made no logical sense. They did fight to keep the people they cared about close. They did build families out of strangers and friends, and anyone who showed them kindness when they needed it most, and Kellinus and Tyrus had shown him more kindness in 3 months than he had received in years of solitary travel through cold and uncaring space. "I am not asking you to love me," Kellinus said. "I am not asking for anything you are not willing to give. I am simply stating that you have a place here with us for as long as you want it. And if you try to leave, I will respectfully disagree with that decision and do everything in my power to change your mind." "That sounds like a threat." "It is a promise," Kellinus said. "My people may live for 300 years, Park Jinho, and I intend to spend them making sure you understand what you are worth." The words hit him harder than any crystalline projectile ever had. Jinho looked at this alien woman, this being from a species and a world so different from his own, and he saw something in her amber eyes that he had not allowed himself to see before. She was not just grateful. She was not just fulfilling an obligation. She cared about him truly. Genuinely cared about him in a way that went beyond debt or duty, or any of the other words he had used to explain away her attention. "I do not know how to do this," he said. "I have been alone for so long. I do not know how to be part of something bigger than myself." "Then we will learn together," Kellinus said. "Tyrus and I are new to this as well. We have been just the two of us since her father died. Having someone else in our lives is strange and frightening and wonderful all at once." "Wonderful. You make her laugh," Kellinus said. "You make her feel safe. You make her believe that the galaxy is not as cold and cruel as it has often seemed. That alone would be enough, to make you precious to me, but you also make me laugh. You make me feel like I'm not alone in carrying the weight of our little family. You make me think that perhaps there is more to life than duty and survival." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the subtle shifts of color in her compound eyes. The way the amber deepened and warmed as she looked at him. "I am not going to force you to stay," she said. "I am not capable of that. And I would not do it even if I could. But I am going to ask you, directly and honestly, to stop trying to leave. Stop looking for excuses to go. Stop treating our home like a temporary way station on your journey to somewhere else. And if I do stay," Jinho said. "What then?" "Then we see what we can build together," Kellenus said. "A life, a family, a future. I do not know exactly what it will look like, but I know I want to find out." Footsteps crunched on the crystal-strewn ground behind them, and Jinho turned to see Tyrus running toward them across the garden, her small wings fluttering with excitement. She was holding something in her hands, a sheet of paper covered in colorful marks that Jinho recognized as Vreth writing. "Implements. Look," she said in halting Galactic Common, the language she had been studying just so she could talk to him. "I made this for you, for us." She held up the paper, and Jinho saw a drawing. 3 figures stood together in front of a ship that looked very much like the steady current. One was tall with beautiful wings. One was small with wings just starting to grow. One was shorter and stockier with no wings at all, but with a smile on its simple face that seemed to radiate happiness. "That is us," Tyrus said. "That is our family." Jinho looked at the drawing. He looked at Kellenus. He looked at Tyrus. This small child who had claimed him from the moment he scooped her up in that burning corridor and never asked for this. He said, "I know." Kellenus said, "I never expected it. Neither did we. I am probably going to be terrible at it. Probably." Kellenus agreed. Humans are famously bad at knowing what is good for them, despite everything. Jinho laughed. It was the first real laugh he had allowed himself in longer than he could remember, and it felt like something breaking open inside him, like light flooding into a room that had been dark for far too long. "Fine," he said. "Fine. I will stay. I will stop trying to leave. I will let you keep me." Tyrus cheered and threw herself at his legs, and Jinho caught her and lifted her up. And she wrapped her arms around his neck and made happy clicking sounds against his ear, over her head. He met Kellenus's eyes. "Do I get any say in how this works?" he asked. Kellenus's eyes shifted to that warm gold he was learning to love. "You can say whatever you want," she said. "I will simply disagree." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around both of them, her wings spreading to encircle them in a cocoon of warmth and light. And Jinho stood there in the singing crystal garden with an alien child in his arms and an alien woman holding them both. He had come to Threshold 7, looking for nothing more than fuel and a quiet day. He was leaving with a family, the galaxy. He decided had a strange sense of humor, but for once, it seemed like the joke was in his favor. And when Tyrus asked if they could have dinner together, all 3 of them at the same table in the home that was now his, Jinho said yes. He would keep saying yes, he realized, for as long as they would let him, and if Kellenus had anything to say about it, that would be a very long time indeed. The medical station was called Verith Prime, and it orbited a pale blue gas giant at the edge of Vreth Collective Space. Jinho spent 7 days in the medical wing, lying in a bed designed for beings with very different bodies than his, while Vreth doctors studied his wounds with a mixture of professional interest and barely concealed amazement. They had never treated a human before. They had read about his species in xenobiology texts and heard stories from traders and diplomats. But actually working on human flesh was a new experience that seemed to fascinate them far more than Jinho was comfortable with. Your cellular regeneration is remarkable. One doctor told him on the third day. The tissue around your wounds is already beginning to knit together. At this rate, you will be fully healed within weeks. That is normal for us, Jinho said. Normal, the doctor repeated. And there was something in her voice that suggested she found the word deeply inadequate. Kalanis visited him every day. She brought Tyrus with her, and the child would climb onto Jinho's bed and settle against his side, chattering at him in a mix of her native language and a few words of Galactic Common. She was learning Jinho did not understand most of what she said, but he smiled and nodded and let her hold his hand. And that seemed to be enough for her. She has become attached to you, Kalana said during one of these visits, watching her daughter curl against the human like a cat seeking warmth. Is that a problem? Not a problem, Kalana said, but it complicates things. What things? Kalanis did not answer immediately. She sat in a chair beside his bed and studied him with those amber eyes that Jinho was beginning to recognize as her thoughtful expression. The color she showed when she was working through something difficult. I told you about Valeth Kiran, she said finally. The life debt. Yes, I have been thinking about it since we arrived here. About what it means and what obligations it creates. And I have realized that I did not explain it fully. Jinho shifted in the bed, trying to find a position that did not pull at his healing wounds. Tell me now, he said. Valeth Kiran is not just gratitude, Kalanis said. It is not even just that. It is a bond that connects the Savior to the family of the saved. Permanently and irrevocably, in the eyes of my people, you are no longer a stranger to us. You are part of our family line. Your needs are our needs. Your enemies are our enemies. Your life is tangled up with ours in ways that cannot be undone. I did not ask for that. I know. I do not want you to feel obligated to me. I know that too. Kalanis leaned forward in her chair. Our expression intent, but here is what you need to understand. Park Jinho, this is not about what you asked for or what you want. It is about what you did. You saw my daughter in danger, and you did not hesitate. You did not calculate. You did not weigh your life against hers and find her wanting. You simply acted. And that action has consequences. Consequences should not include being bound to someone against my will. Is it against your will? The question caught Jinho off guard. He looked at Tyrus, who had fallen asleep against his side, her small body warm and trusting. And he thought about the past week, about how natural it had felt to have these two nearby, to hear Kalanis's voice and see Tyrus's smile, to be part of something that was more than just himself. I do not know, he said honestly. I'm not used to this. I have been alone for a long time. I do not know how to be part of a family. Neither do I. Kalanis said, my partner died 3 years ago. Tyrus has not had a father figure since she was barely old enough to remember him. I thought we would continue alone, that we did not need anyone else. What changed? You took 3 crystalline shards to the back to save a child you had never met. Kalanis said, you fought through wounds that should have killed you. You led soldiers away from us, even though it meant risking your own life. And when it was over, you did not ask for payment or thanks or anything at all. You just accepted that it was the right thing to do. She reached out and touched his hand, her clawed fingers gentle against his skin. I have traveled the galaxy for 12 years, she said. I have met hundreds of different species and thousands of different individuals. And I have never encountered anyone like you. Your people's reputation for stubbornness and recklessness is apparently well earned. But so is your reputation for something else. What? Compassion. Kalanis said, a willingness to put others first that goes beyond logic or self-interest. It is terrifying and admirable in equal measure. And I find that I do not want to let it out of my sight. Jinho was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. What happens now? He asked. That depends on you. Kalanis said, Velith Kirin creates obligations on both sides. You are bound to us, but we are also bound to you. If you choose to leave and return to your previous life, we will honor that choice. We will not pursue you or make demands. But the bond will remain, and my people will know of it. And they will treat you as family whenever your paths cross. And if I do not choose to leave. Kalanus' eyes shifted to a color Jinho had not seen before, a warm golden tone that seemed to glow from within. Then we will find a way forward together, she said, whatever that looks like. Tyrus stirred against his side, and her compound eyes blinked open. And she looked up at Jinho with sleepy contentment. She said something in breath. And Kalanus translated with a small smile. She said she had a good dream. Kalanus said, she dreamed that you stayed with us forever and taught her how to fly your ship. I do not know if I can stay forever, Jinho said, but maybe I can stay for a while. And we can see what happens. Tyrus chirped happily and snuggled closer to him. And across the bed, Kalanus watched with those golden eyes. And Jinho felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for longer than he could remember. He had spent so many years alone, moving from job to job, station to station, never putting down roots, never letting anyone get close enough to matter. He had told himself it was because he liked his freedom, his independence, his ability to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. But now, lying in a hospital bed on an alien station with a sleeping child pressed against his side, and her mother, looking at him like he was something precious and rare. He wondered if maybe he had just been afraid of loss, afraid of connection, afraid of caring about something enough that it could hurt him. Those fears had not gone away. They were still there, lurking in the back of his mind, whispering warnings about all the ways this could end badly. But they were quieter now, drowned out by something stronger, something that looked like a small Wrathchild holding his hand like he was the safest thing in the universe, something that looked like a mother's golden eyes and the promise of a future he had never expected. Jinho closed his own eyes and let himself rest. And for the first time in years, he did not dream of empty ships and silent stars. He dreamed of wings and warmth and the sound of his name spoken in two different voices, calling him home. The path to Docking Bay 17 was blocked. Jinho crouched at the corner of a corridor and watched a squad of 6 shard soldiers standing guard at the junction that led to his ship, their crystalline bodies humming with a low frequency that made his teeth ache. Is there another way around? Kalanus asked from behind him. No, Jinho said. That junction is the only access point to the bay. We have to go through them. Kalanus moved up beside him and studied the soldiers with her compound eyes, calculating distances and angles in ways that Jinho could not follow. I have a sidearm, she said. I can fight. But 6 against 1 is not odds. I can win. 6 against 2, Jinho corrected. You are wounded, Kalanus said. You have 3 holes in your body, and you have lost a significant amount of blood. You are in no condition to fight. Watch me. Kalanus made a frustrated clicking sound. Humans, she said. I am beginning to understand why my people call your world a planet of madness. You do not know when to stop. We know, Jinho said. We just choose not to. He looked back at Tyrus, who was huddled against a collapsed beam a few meters away, her wings pressed flat against her back in a posture of fear. Here is what we are going to do, he said. I am going to create a distraction. Draw them away from the junction. When they come after me, you take Tyrus and get to my ship. The access code is 7-7-3-9-blue. Can you remember that? I can remember it. Kalanus said, but I am not going to leave you to die for us. I am not planning to die. Your plans do not seem to account for the limitations of your own body. Jinho almost laughed. You would be surprised how often humans hear that, he said, and you would be surprised how often we prove it wrong. Now get ready to move." Before Calenus could argue further, Jinho stepped out of cover and into the open corridor. He did not try to be subtle. He grabbed a piece of debris from the floor and hurled it at the nearest shard soldier. And when the crystalline creature turned toward him, he shouted and waved his arms like a man trying to flag down a rescue ship. "Hey," he yelled, "over here. Come and get me." The shard reacted exactly as he had hoped. 4 of them broke formation and charged toward him, their bodies reshaping into combat configurations as they moved, while 2 remained at the junction. Not perfect, but good enough. Jinho ran. He sprinted down a side corridor with the shard soldiers close behind, their footsteps ringing against the deck plates like chimes struck too hard. The pain from his wounds flared with every step, but he pushed it down and kept moving, leading the soldiers away from Calenus and Tyrus, buying them time to reach the ship. He ducked into a maintenance access tunnel and crawled through pipes and cables that scraped against his injuries, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He emerged in a cargo storage area filled with crates and containers, and he started weaving through them, using the obstacles to slow his pursuers. The shard were faster than him. One of them appeared around a corner directly in his path, its arm already morphing into a blade. And Jinho did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed a cargo hook from a nearby loading station and swung it with all the strength he had left. The hook connected with the shard's crystalline head and sent cracks spiderwebbing through its structure. The soldier staggered, its form flickering and unstable, and Jinho hit it again and again, until it collapsed into a pile of inert crystal fragments. He did not have time to celebrate. Another soldier came at him from behind, and he turned too slowly, and a crystalline blade caught him across the left arm. The pain was blinding. Jinho stumbled backward, clutching his arm, and the soldier advanced for the killing blow. Then a beam of concentrated light struck the shard in the back, and it screamed, a high piercing sound like glass shattering, and Calenus stood at the entrance to the cargo bay, her sidearm raised, her compound eyes blazing with fierce amber light. "I told you I was not leaving you behind," she said. "The junction. Tyrus is hiding near the bay doors. I dealt with the 2 guards before I came for you." Jinho stared at her. "You dealt with 2 shard soldiers by yourself." "I am a diplomatic courier," Calenus said. "We are trained for situations like this. Now stop bleeding and start moving." They ran together through the corridors, Jinho's new wound adding to the chorus of pain that sang through his body with every step. They found Tyrus where Calenus had left her, curled into a small ball near the entrance to Docking Bay 17. And the child leaped up when she saw them and ran to wrap her arms around her mother's legs. "We need to go," Jinho said. "More will come." He led them through the bay doors and across the metal expanse of the docking platform to where his ship waited. The vessel was nothing special, a medium-sized freighter called the Steady Current, designed for hauling cargo rather than speed or combat, but it was space-worthy and fueled, and it was their only way off this dying station. Jinho punched in his access code, and the boarding ramp lowered, and he ushered Calenus and Tyrus inside before sealing the hatch behind them. "Can you fly?" Calenus asked. "I have been flying since before I could walk," Jinho said. It was not entirely true, but it was close enough. He made his way to the cockpit and dropped into the pilot's seat, his hands moving across the controls with practiced ease despite the trembling that had started in his fingers. The engines came online, and the docking clamps released, and Jinho guided the Steady Current out of the bay and into the cold darkness of space behind them. Threshold 7 burned shard assault shuttles still circled the station like predators around wounded prey, but they paid no attention to a single cargo freighter fleeing the scene. Jinho set a course for the nearest Reth medical station and engaged the autopilot. And then he leaned back in his chair and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for hours. Calenus appeared in the cockpit doorway. You need medical attention, she said. The wound on your arm is deep. I know. You could lose the arm if it is not treated properly. I know. Kellenis crossed the small space and knelt beside his chair. And she started examining his arm with the same careful focus she had shown when removing the shards from his back. Why do you keep doing this? She asked as she worked. Keep doing what? Hurting yourself for us, ignoring your own pain and your own safety to make sure we survive. I do not understand it. Jinho watched her tend to his wound. Her alien hands gentle despite their claws. And he thought about how to answer her question. On Earth, he said finally. We have this concept, this idea that some things matter more than yourself. More than your own comfort or safety or even your own life. We call it different things: duty, honor, love, but at its core, it is all the same thing. It is putting yourself between danger and someone who cannot face it alone. Your people do this for strangers, Kellenis said, for beings they have never met. Sometimes. Why? Jinho shrugged, and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his arm. Because we can, he said. Because someone has to. Because when we see someone in trouble, the part of us that wants to help is stronger than the part that wants to run away. I do not know if that makes us brave or stupid or both. Kellenis finished binding his wound and sat back on her heels, looking up at him with those deep amber eyes. My people would say it makes you dangerous, she said. A species that does not prioritize its own survival is unpredictable. Impossible to negotiate with, impossible to control. And what do you say? Kellenis was quiet for a long moment. I say it makes you worth keeping, she said. She rose and left the cockpit. And Jinho sat there in the pilot's seat with his wounds aching and his heart doing something strange in his chest. Tyrus appeared a moment later, climbing into the co-pilot's seat and curling up. There, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She reached out and took his uninjured hand. And she held it tight, and she did not let go until they reached the medical station 3 days later. It was not the sharp, immediate pain of the initial impacts, but something deeper and more persistent. A throbbing ache that seemed to pulse with every beat of his heart. He was lying on his stomach on a hard surface, and someone was touching his back with careful, precise movements. Do not move, a voice said, and he recognized it as belonging to the Vreth female Kellenis. I am removing the third shard now, and if you shift your position, I may cause additional damage. Jinho stayed still. He focused on breathing, on counting the inhales and exhales, on anything that would keep his mind occupied while foreign hands worked inside his wounded flesh. How long was I unconscious? He asked. Perhaps 20 minutes? Kellenis said. I carried you and Tyrus to this section of the station after you collapsed. It appears to be sealed off from the main corridors. The fighting has not reached here yet. Jinho heard a soft click and then a wet sliding sound, and he felt something pull free from the muscle of his lower back. The pain spiked bright and hot before settling back to its previous level. That is the last one, Kellenis said. The wounds are deep, but they did not strike anything vital. You will need proper medical treatment, but you should survive until we can reach it. She moved around to where he could see her, and she crouched down so that her compound eyes were level with his face. How are you still conscious? She asked. And there was something in her harmonic voice that sounded almost like accusation. How are you still alive? Jinho blinked at her. I do not understand the question. Those projectiles, Kellenis said. They are designed to shatter on impact and spread crystalline fragments throughout the target's body. A single hit is fatal to most species. You took 3 direct impacts and you kept moving. You should be dead 10 times over. Humans are difficult to kill, Jinho said. It came out sounding like a joke. But Kellenis did not laugh. I have studied xenobiology, she said. I am a trained medic. I have learned the physiology of 73 different species, and I have never encountered anything like what I just witnessed. Your body is refusing to die in ways that should not be possible. Jinho pushed himself up slowly, ignoring the protest of his wounded muscles, until he was sitting with his back against a bulkhead. Where I come from, he said. We evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. Predators and diseases and natural disasters and 1,000 other things. The ones who survived were the ones who could take damage and keep going. It is just how we are built. Kellenus stared at him with those shifting amber eyes. And behind her, Jinho could see Tyrus watching from a short distance away. The child was no longer trembling. But she had not taken her gaze off him since he woke. Your planet, Kellenus said slowly. What is it called? Earth. I have heard stories about Earth. Kellenus said. My people call it a death world. A planet so hostile that no civilized species would ever evolve there. Most of us believed the stories were exaggerated. They probably were not, Jinho said. He tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace as another wave of pain washed through him. Can you walk? Kellenus asked. We need to reach the docking bays. My ship was destroyed in the initial attack, but if you have a vessel, we may be able to escape before the Shard complete their sweep of the station. I can walk. Jinho said he was not entirely sure this was true, but he was not going to admit that to her. My ship is in docking bay 17. It is not far. He started to push himself to his feet, and Kellenus reached out to help him. Her clawed hands surprisingly gentle as they gripped his arm and steadied him. For a moment they stood close together, and Jinho realized that she was nearly a head taller than him. Her body built for grace and speed in ways his stocky human frame could never match. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving her. I just did what anyone would do. Kellenus made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, she said. You did not. Before Jinho could respond, Tyrus approached them. She moved cautiously, her underdeveloped wings twitching with each step, and she stopped directly in front of Jinho and looked up at him with those enormous compound eyes. She spoke in her native language, a series of clicks and musical tones that Jinho could not understand. But the question in her voice was clear. Kellenus translated. She wants to know why you helped her, she said. She wants to know why you let yourself be hurt for someone you do not know. Jinho looked down at the child, at this small, fragile being from a species and a world utterly unlike his own. And he thought about all the complicated answers he could give about duty and honor and the value of innocent life. But in the end, the truth was much simpler. Than that, I saw a scared kid, he said. That was enough. Kellenus translated his words for Tyrus, and the child was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Jinho's hand in her own, her small clawed fingers wrapping around his much larger ones. And she did not let go. She says she will protect you now, Kellenus said. And her voice had gone soft in a way Jinho had not heard before. She says you are hurt because of her. So she will make sure nothing else hurts you until you are better. Jinho felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with his wounds. Tell her thank you, he said. Tell her I appreciate that very much, Kellenus told her. And Tyrus made a small chirping sound that might have been happiness and squeezed his hand tighter. They started moving through the damaged station, Jinho in the lead despite his injuries, with Tyrus clinging to his hand and Kellenus following close behind. The corridors were filled with debris and bodies and the acrid smell of burnt metal. And more than once they had to stop and hide when they heard Shard patrols passing nearby during one of these stops. Pressed into a dark alcove while crystalline soldiers marched past. Kellenus leaned close to Jinho and spoke in a whisper. I need to tell you something, she said. Something about what you have done and what it means to my people. Can it wait until we are not about to die? It could, Kellenus said. But I want you to understand now, before we reach your ship. I want you to know what kind of bond you have created." Jinho looked at her, at the serious set of her features and the deep amber glow of her eyes, and he nodded for her to continue. "When a Vreth child is saved from certain death," Kellenis said, "the one who saves them becomes something more than a stranger, more than a friend, more than even family as you might understand it. They become bound to us through what we call Veleth Kiran, a debt that can never be repaid because some things are beyond payment. I do not want a debt." Jinho said, "I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything. I made a choice and I would make it again. That is the end of it." "You do not understand," Kellenis said. "Veleth Kiran is not about what you want or what I want. It is about what is. You saved my daughter's life at the cost of your own blood and pain. That creates a connection that my people do not have the ability to ignore." The Shard Patrol moved on, and Jinho pushed out of the alcove and started walking again, his mind churning over what Kellenis had told him. He had not saved Tyrus because he wanted anything in return. He had not even thought about consequences or rewards or what might come after. He had simply seen a child in danger and acted. Now it seemed that action had tangled him up in something much larger than himself, something he did not yet understand. Tyrus was still holding his hand, her small presence warm against his palm. And when he looked down at her, she was looking up at him with absolute trust in her alien eyes, whatever came next. Jinho realized he was not going to be able to walk away from these two, and he was starting to suspect that he did not want to. Park Jinho had seen plenty of bad days in his 10 years hauling cargo through contested space, but this one was shaping up to be the worst of his life. He stood at the refueling terminal on Threshold 7, a neutral trading station that floated in the empty darkness between two warring territories, and he watched his credit balance slowly climb as fuel pumped into his ship. The station was busy today, filled with travelers and merchants from a dozen different species, all trying to conduct business in one of the few places where the Vreth Collective and the Shard Dominion had agreed not to kill each other. That agreement was about to break. The first explosion came from somewhere near the main docking ring, a deep boom that shook the deck plates under Jinho's boots and sent a ripple of screams through the crowded terminal. He dropped to one knee instinctively. Years of training from his days as an emergency responder on Earth kicking in before his conscious mind could catch up. The second explosion was closer, and this time he saw the flash through the viewport. A Shard Dominion assault shuttle had breached the station's outer hull and was pouring soldiers into the corridors. The Shard were crystalline beings, their bodies made of living mineral that could reshape itself into weapons and armor, and they moved through the station like a wave of glittering death. Jinho watched them cut down a Vreth trader not 30 meters from where he crouched, their arm blades slicing through the insectoid alien's carapace like it was paper. He needed to get to his ship. He needed to leave. He started moving, keeping low, using the chaos and the crowds as cover while he worked his way toward Docking Bay 17, where his freighter waited. That was when he saw the child. She was Vreth, small and delicate, with iridescent wings that had not yet grown large enough to carry her weight. And she stood frozen in the middle of an exposed corridor. Completely alone, the adult Vreth around her had fled or fallen, and she remained there like a statue, her compound eyes wide with terror, her thin limbs locked in place by fear. She was too young to overcome. Jinho knew what fear paralysis looked like. He had seen it in humans, in the aftermath of earthquakes and fires and all the disasters he had responded to back on Earth. And he knew that the child would not move on her own. She could not. Her body had betrayed her at the worst possible moment. A squad of Shard soldiers advanced down the corridor toward her, their crystalline bodies catching the emergency lights and throwing fractured rainbows across the walls as they moved. They were not specifically hunting her. Jinho realized they were simply clearing the area of everyone and everything in their path. And she was in their path. He did not make a conscious decision later. When people asked him why he did what he did, he would struggle to explain because there had been no moment of choice. No weighing of options, no calculation of risk versus reward. There was only a scared child and danger coming for her, and the absolute certainty that he could not stand there and watch her die. Jinho ran. He sprinted out of cover and into the open corridor, his boots pounding against the deck plates, his arms pumping, his lungs burning as he pushed his body to move faster than it wanted to go. The shard soldiers saw him immediately. They raised their arms, and the crystalline structures of their limbs reshaped into projectile launchers, and they opened fire. The first shard hit him in the lower back, and it felt like being stabbed with a blade of ice that burned instead of froze. The second shard caught him between the shoulder blades, and he stumbled, but did not fall. The third shard buried itself in his right side, just below his ribs, and he felt something inside him tear. He kept running. He reached the child and scooped her up with one arm, clutching her small body against his chest. And he turned and ran for the nearest cover, a collapsed section of wall that had buckled during the initial explosions. More shards flew past him, one grazing his ear, another ricocheting off the deck near his feet. But he made it. He threw himself behind the debris and curled his body around the child, shielding her completely. And he waited for the shard soldiers to follow and finish what they had started. But they did not come. The soldiers had bigger targets, more valuable prey, and they moved past the corridor toward whatever objective had brought them to this station in the first place. Jinho lay there in the dust and the darkness, bleeding from 3 wounds, holding a trembling alien child who made soft, clicking sounds of distress against his chest. He should assess his injuries. He should find a way to contact his ship. He should do 100 things that his training told him were important. But right now, all he could do was hold on to the child and breathe through the pain and listen to the sound of weapons fire and screaming that echoed through the dying station. Tyrus, a voice called from somewhere in the smoke and chaos. It was a female voice, high and musical, despite the raw edge of desperation that cut through every syllable. And it repeated the word over and over like a prayer. Tyrus, Tyrus, where are you? Tyrus. The child in Jinho's arms stirred at the sound, and she made a noise that might have been a word in a language he did not speak. Is that your name? Jinho asked, and his voice came out rough and wet in a way that worried him. Tyrus. Is someone looking for you? The child Tyrus clicked and chirped and struggled against his grip, trying to turn toward the source of the calling voice. Hey, Jinho said, keeping his hold gentle but firm. Hey, it is okay. I'm going to help you find her. But I need you to stay quiet for just a moment. Can you do that? Tyrus went still, her compound eyes fixed on his face. And Jinho saw something shift in those multifaceted depths, a recognition, perhaps, that this strange soft-bodied creature was not her enemy. Good girl, he said. He forced himself to sit up, biting back a groan as the movement sent fresh waves of agony radiating from the shards embedded in his flesh. And he raised his voice as loud as he dared. Over here, he called. I have her. I have Tyrus. She is safe. The calling stopped. For a moment there was only silence and the distant sounds of battle. And then a figure emerged from the smoke. A wreath female, tall and slender, with wings that spread wide behind her like sheets of living stained glass. Her compound eyes swept the debris field until they found Jinho. And then they locked onto the small form cradled against his chest. And the color in those eyes shifted from panicked white to something warm and golden. Tyrus, the female breathed, and she rushed forward, her clawed feet clicking against the deck plates. She stopped short when she got close enough to see Jinho clearly. to see the blood soaking through his jacket, the crystalline shards protruding from his body, the pale sheen of shock beginning to settle over his features. "You are hurt," she said, and her voice carried a strange harmonic quality, like two notes sounding at once. "What happened? How did you—" "She was in the corridor," Jinho said. "The shard were coming. I could not let them." He trailed off. Suddenly too tired to explain, Tyrus reached for her mother, and Jinho let her go, transferring the child into the female's waiting arms with hands that had started to shake. The Vreth female clutched her daughter close, her wings folding around them both like a protective cocoon. And over the child's head her eyes met Jinho's. The color in them shifted again, from golden to deep amber. And something passed across her face that Jinho was too exhausted to read. "My name is Kalinas," she said, "and you have just changed everything." Jinho wanted to ask what she meant, but the darkness at the edges of his vision was growing, and the deck plates were tilting in ways that deck plates should not tilt. And the last thing he saw before unconsciousness claimed him was those amber eyes watching him fall.